Hi, and welcome to Human Tech, a podcast about the intersection of humans and technology. My name is Guthrie Weinschenk, and here with me I have Susan. Hello, Susan.
Hi there.
So we had, I guess, been a little lazy, and we kind of had 2 podcasts in 3 weeks. So we wanted to do a back-to-back, a double header almost, as it were, so that we've completely caught up and we're right back on schedule. So we are going to do part 2 of Hackable Brains today. And if you didn't listen to part 1, you don't need to by any stretch of the imagination, but it could be useful just to kind of go over some of the things that we had done. Again, we had covered basically some of the interesting how the brain works and some research about well, how about I just let Susan take over because she's going to be getting us started anyways.
Oh, so you were doing a review of what we talked about
I was
last
doing
time?
A review, and then I
and
was
then
like,
you said, forget the review.
Well,
all right,
fine.
but let me ask you this. We did talk last time about single tasking rather than trying to do multitasking, which doesn't work and doesn't exist. So, and it's only been a couple days actually since we recorded that last one. Or maybe one day or 2 days. Yesterday?
It was yesterday.
Did you try it at all? Single tasking?
Try what?
Single tasking. Did you even try it?
No.
Apparently not.
No.
I actually tried it a little bit. But it's only been 1 day. So I'll give you a couple more days. And then
Like I said in the previous podcast, I kind of already knew this, and I know it's probably better for me.
You're not giving up your multitasking. I get it.
But
all right. Let's move on.
It's like someone, who has some sort of bad habit that they know is a bad habit.
And but it's not so bad that it's ruining their life.
At least that's what they think.
All right. But now we'll see when we talk about the stuff today about hacking your brain. We'll see if maybe you like any of these any better.
Okay.
All right. So we'll see if you're willing to do this. So, some of this is kind of brain hacking. We almost get to the point. I mean, we could get to the point where we're talking about, more than brain. We could talk about body hacking. And
no.
But the reason I say
I only say no because brain hacking is a 45-minute topic. Like, we should have a whole nother podcast on body hacking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, as we talk about the stuff, I made some notes about what we might talk about today. It does affect, though, some of this affects not just your brain. But anyway, I wanted to start. I mentioned actually on the last episode, I made a very, very slight mention of something called the vagus nerve.
Yes,
and I want
you're all about Vegas.
All about Vegas. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. And I want to talk about the vagus nerve because this is actually the reason I want to talk about it is because I'm fascinated with it. Mm-hmm. But I think that this is going to be big. I'm experimenting with it on myself.
Yeah, that's always that's evil scientist 101, right? First, develop a secret plan, and then because it's secret, you must experiment on yourself. And then if it gets horribly wrong, you turn into some sort of mutant. I think that's how that works. Or you create Frankenstein.
Have you noticed that I'm any different lately?
Have you been going through long stretches where you don't remember where you've been?
I'm always that way. No, just kidding. All right, so you have this vagus nerve, vagus, and it goes from your brain all the way down through your body, through your digestive system. It's a big nerve. It's like, I think it's the largest nerve in your body. You actually have 2 of them. You have one on the left side of your body and one on the right side of your body. And the vagus nerve is... It's interesting. It's in charge of. Do you remember the terms sympathetic and parasympathetic?
Yes, but okay. I'm sure our audience does not.
Okay, so you have, these are these really like? It's kind of. They're kind of phrases that are used to describe. I don't know that they're describing actual physical things, but okay, parasympathetic is part of what's called the automatic nervous system. Okay? And it's a whole bunch of nerves all over the place that start at the brain and go through the lower end of the spinal cord and supply all your internal organs and your blood vessels and everything else with electrical impulses. So the parasympathetic is governing all the unconscious actions. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, you digest your food,
Right.
all that stuff that you don't. It's not like you stop and you say, "Oh, now I'd like to digest my food," right? I mean, it just happens. So that's what the parasympathetic nervous system does. It takes care of all the stuff going on, and that starts in your brain. Well, then there's the sympathetic. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the sympathetic system, it's kind of like an opposite system. And the sympathetic nervous system kind of balances out the parasympathetic. So the sympathetic system is going to accelerate your heart rate, constrict your blood vessels, raise your blood pressure. The parasympathetic is going to do the opposite. So they kind of work in this balance, counterbalance, balance, counterbalance constantly. And, that's going on and you're not aware of it. So the vagus nerve, the reason the vagus nerve is so important, and the reason I started with the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, is the vagus nerve is kind of always monitoring those two systems, and it's kind of telling it kind of says, oh, parasympathetic, you should turn on a little bit more and slow everything down. Oh, sympathetic, no, now it's slowed down too much. Okay, sympathetic, you should speed things up. So it kind of has control over everything that's going on. And the interesting medical stuff that's coming out is that some people, their vagus nerve, they call it tonal quality. So some people have like a normally active vagus nerve, and some people have an underactive vagus nerve. And if you have an underactive vagus nerve, you're going to be prone to certain diseases and problems, rheumatoid arthritis, autoimmune, inflammation. And so doctors have started using electrical stimulation to stimulate the vagus nerve and thereby affect your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. Is this like too medical?
No.
So the people or doctors, medical community is starting to use the stimulation of the vagus nerve, for instance, to deal with depression and epilepsy.
Yeah, now I should note, this is electronic stimulation.
Yeah.
Is pretty common. Again, a lot of your body systems run electricity, so if you gently kind of stimulate it, you can muck around with some of the stuff. This is slightly different than shock therapy.
Oh yeah, it's really different than shock therapy.
And by slightly different, I mean completely not related whatsoever.
And it's not, and it's even different than, if you think about like people who have pacemakers or defibrillators, that to stimulate their heart, that's different too. These are if you're stimulating the vagus nerve. Well, some people are familiar with what's called TENS units, TENS. Like if you have pain, and I talk to a lot of people who know, they go, oh yeah, TENS unit, I know what that is. It's a little thing you buy. You can buy them for $15, and you put a little patch on two different parts of your body, and then it sends a really little bit of electrical stimulation to your skin, and it can help just relieve pain in like your back or something. So it's kind of, when we talk about stimulating the vagus nerve, we're talking about that, just a little bit of electricity. Now, when it was discovered that by stimulating the vagus nerve, you could help with some of these physical symptoms, and also emotional, right, depression and so on. When they first discovered that, what they would do is they would actually implant this into your body, like around your neck. And of course, that's expensive and requires surgery, and so not very many people have been doing that. But now there are interesting devices out. So one of them is this device. It looks like I don't know. It's got this round thing, and you actually just hold it on your neck area, and it sends electrical stimulation. And the newest ones. This is why this is called a brain hack, because we're finally getting to the brain. The newest ones, you actually attach. You don't attach, but you just kind of set them up. They sit in your ear. It's like a little headphone, and because it was discovered that your outer ear is the topmost part of the vagus nerve. There's a little spot that if you give that a little bit of electrical stimulation, it stimulates the vagus nerve. And people are now, stimulating the vagus nerve for this variety of health and emotional issues. So the idea is that if you were to stimulate your vagus nerve, like maybe for 10 minutes, 2 or 3 times a day, it would make you calm and focused. That's the idea. Now, I am not, this is where we have to do the medical disclaimer.
Mm-hmm.
I am not a doctor. And I am not saying that you should go and do this. And in fact, if you're in the U.S., you know what? You can't go do this, because these devices, the under the skin stuff you can get, from obviously a regular doctor and a surgeon. But the ones that you don't have to implant, the ones that you stimulate from the outside, the FDA has not approved these in the U.S. If you live outside the U.S., you can get one. But in the U.S., you can't get one, which is kind of interesting. So, like I said, I'm not a doctor. So I'm not saying you should go do this. But I think... and then I want to talk about another kind of similar thing, but not exactly the same. And then we can just talk in general about, where this is all headed. Because I think we're headed... Did you ever watch Star Trek?
No, not really.
You're not a Trekkie, huh? You should maybe.
It was a little too corny for me. Just
don't you do you remember though?
I like the recent Star Trek movies. I enjoy the summary of the Star Trek plot lines.
Have we mentioned on the podcast what we found out about Star Trek when we were in Stockholm?
I don't know.
Do you remember when they said that they used the Scandinavian designed salt and pepper shakers on the set of Star Trek?
Yes, I remember.
For the medical. All right, you'd see. I get excited because I remember Star Trek. You're not going to remember. You probably don't know this, but there was the doctor, whose name I don't remember. What was the doctor's name on Star Trek? Anyway,
I don't know. I didn't watch Star Trek.
The doctor was always healing you by taking this device, and he would he would scan it up and down your body, and he could tell what was wrong with you, and then he could use it to heal you.
Right.
With some form.
That was a salt and pepper shaker. Everyone.
That was actually a salt and pepper shaker, Scandinavian design. That's what we found out in Stockholm. We have to find out if that's really true.
I'm 100% sure it is, because I think I looked at a picture of it.
And it was a salt and pepper shaker.
It's just kind of like a metal cylinder.
Anyway, the reason I'm bringing up Star Trek is that on Star Trek, the idea was that you could heal, you could diagnose and heal with electrical stimulation. And I think that we're absolutely getting there, and I think people will be able to, do this hack your brain and hack your body from your brain themselves. All right.
So
yeah.
so my turn.
Wait, all right, but I got to talk about the trigeminal nerve. I'm not even done. Okay, go ahead. What's your turn?
So this is I think my personal opinion
Yeah.
is that a lot of health stuff,
Yeah.
there are things that are out of balance,
Yeah.
and then, but especially in America, we have a culture of fixes. And so the idea is, well, if we do something, then it's either healthy or unhealthy. It's just gray, black, or white.
What, like, for example, what do you mean by that?
Anything, literally any medical profession ever.
Okay.
So step one, right? Vitamins.
Okay.
Well, if vitamins are good for me, then more vitamins is more good for me.
Yeah, which isn't true, but okay.
So, or, so there's just a lot of cases, especially with dietary stuff. So I think that in some cases you're out of balance one way.
Yeah.
And in some cases you're out of balance the other way.
Yeah.
And there are also situations in which putting weird changes into your body doesn't actually do anything.
Yeah.
But stimulates some sort of response from your body, like, oh my God, what's going on?
Yeah.
And that in turn can help underlying conditions.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. But what you're doing actually doesn't have anything to do with it. So I can give a bunch of examples. So there was a guy. There's these patients who have kind of irreversible brain damage, right?
Yeah.
They can't walk, they can't do certain functions, they can't talk, that kind of stuff. And so he was like, hey, I have a crazy idea. Let's just drill a hole into their brain, which is pretty normal procedure, by the way, and we'll just inject some stem cells and just see what happens, like, whatever, stem cells are cool. We'll just inject them to where the site of the brain injury was, and we'll just see what happens. Yeah. And all the doctors were like, this was the worst idea ever. You should note that stem cells, they have the ability to turn into any kind of cell.
Yeah.
So they're theoretically healing in some way, but on the flip side, like, they won't fix broken brain structures. They'll just turn into brain cells. It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But he got 20 some patients to sign off on it, and 70% had like noticeable improvement, and 30% had like ridiculously great improvement. And people were like, what on earth is going on? And the current running theory is that by injecting the area with stem cells, the area freaked out. Yeah. It was like, what is going on? I have no idea what this is, and sent in stuff to deal with the stem cells. But in doing so, it triggered regenerative natural processes in the brain that helped redevelop some of these broken brain injuries.
Well, okay, so there was a. All right, we're going far afield,
but I gotta tie this in.
Okay, go ahead.
So, right? So, it stimulating for some people, stimulation of the vagus nerve may help, and for some people it may hurt, and it just depends what side of the spectrum you're on. But of course, people are going to be like, wait, this is healthy, and therefore more is good, so I should
I agree with
do
you.
like a crazy amount.
Yeah,
and that's what's going to
dangerous.
happen with this in a couple of years,
probably
the same way that, well, okay,
but the research from the NIH is showing that it is helping with like rheumatoid arthritis and diabetes and all kinds of stuff. By the way,
if you want to help depression, you should take shrooms.
Okay, wait a minute. Now we're going way far afield.
Xylophone.
Okay, just this week, which is June of 2016, was some reports about some people who had severe multiple sclerosis being helped by a stem cell. The same thing. It seemed to rebuild the immune system. I just thought I'd mention that. Anyway, back to though The vagus nerve.
I just, whenever there's claims of
you're
regeneration and healing, and
you're a skeptic.
I am not a skeptic in the results, but I'm a skeptic in the process. So.
You mean the hype and stuff?
Well, like I said, like, okay, so like gluten-free, like there probably are no, but seriously, like I definitely believe that people feel better if they some people, many people feel better after they cut gluten out of their diet, or if they cut meat out of their diet, or if they cut whatever it is out of their diet, or and some people feel the same, and some of it is just, the placebo effect, and some of it is actually stuff going on in their body, and some of it is that they're sensitive to gluten. But I think that's a small percentage. But certainly, if you're not, there's a famous Greek philosopher who, when asked what to do, the state was in a period of turmoil, like political turmoil, and they said, what should we do? And so he said, well, you should you should get rid of all the criminal, or like set all the criminals loose and get rid of all the laws, because if disaster is our current course, then surely its opposite must bring salvation, and which is kind of funny. But again, the point is that, well, if things you're doing aren't feeling good, well, then obviously, like shocks to the body, you're doing drastic changes in diet or stimulation, will do something. So I don't, the idea that it's like you're broken and then it's regenerating you, I don't personally believe in most of that.
Well, all right. Now you brought up placebo, so now we have to mention placebo if we're talking about the brain, because the whole idea of placebo effect, right, which happens with medicine, in an experiment, people are given, sugar pills, and or sometimes it's not pills, sometimes it's, a certain kind of treatment, or, electrical stimulation that they're supposedly getting, except they're not getting any, right? The placebo effect, where you're not given anything or any active intervention, and yet your body responds as though you were, is really common. And it, any study that's done will show some placebo effect, and oftentimes the placebo effect is almost as good or better than the actual intervention. But that's a very real thing. I mean, that the idea is that your brain will produce certain chemicals and hormones and electrical stimulation, partially because you believe you are getting help or medicine or whatever, and so there are, for instance, the brain has natural opioids that it releases in certain situations that are as powerful as morphine. So your brain can create this stuff.
Well, so this is I guess my big point about half-whole brains. So especially, no offense, but especially your generation right now is really.
Oh, you mean the older millennials?
Yes,
is that my generation?
Your generation, the older millennials.
Yes. What about us?
There is, there's a whole movement of mucking around with your body.
Well, because we're getting older and our bodies are falling apart.
I understand. But so
you will be doing this when you are older.
I'm sure I will. But so for the right, you can muck around with your body by what you intake. Right? Yes. So you got all kinds of dietary trends. Yes. You can muck around your body with adding certain proteins that didn't exist, right? So you got all the medicines and supplements.
You can do mindfulness meditation. Stuff. Your alma mater, University of Wisconsin.
Yes.
Has a huge center of that studies the physical, emotional and mental effects, brain effects of mindfulness meditation.
But here's the point: is that all of this is just a various form of you go in your brain, or
Yeah.
in the body,
Yeah.
and you just kind of you're mucking stuff around, and you're hoping that you land in the right outcome. And
Okay.
so you're just mucking around.
Yeah.
So now that we've come to an age of hackable brains, where
Yeah.
you can get implants and you can do like electronic stimulation,
Yes.
we have a whole new arena where people can muck around with their bodies in various forms
And their brains.
and figure out, oh, this makes me healthy, or this will help in some way.
Yeah.
Because that's always what we do. We find a way to muck around, and then we decide that this is better than not mucking around, and then that's the key to everything.
Are you saying this is a good idea or a bad idea?
No, I just think it's a continuation of a trend. And I think, obviously, the more we know about the body, the better health results we will get. And again, like I said, like in some people, like this really is the treatment that they need to fix whatever underlying condition that they have, right? Like understimulation of this or overstimulation of that. And because the other thing is you can actually have less stimulation by zapping yourself, right? So people who have epilepsy, the brain implants that they get when they sense brain waves of an epileptic episode, it basically sends a huge stimulation to the brain and just kind of, I don't want to say shorts everything because that's the wrong metaphor, but essentially sends its own kind of competing electronic stimulus to stop the rolling epilepsy
kind of
episode.
like noise canceling or something.
Right? And the body has a natural response, right? That's why when you smoke cigarettes and you have nicotine, the body produces less nicotine, and that's how you get addicted to smoking. So there are certain, functions that right? So cuz when you in some cases when you stimulate a nerve, right? It causes the nerve to do more or the body to increase it's response. And sometimes when you give it more, the net result is that the body will decrease its response. Right. And it's really, right. So you could be like, oh, like this is, blah, 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 blah. So like, anyways, I don't want to get too off track, but there are lots of ways in which people think they're doing X, they're moving in a certain direction, and this is why, and then they start feeling better.
Yeah.
Because they think they're getting less of this or less of that. But in reality, and can I give you the perfect example?
Yeah.
Which is cholesterol, right? So 75% of cholesterol is actually manufactured by the body. Only 25% is from what you intake.
Right.
So, right, so you could be like, I want to have less cholesterol, okay?
Yeah.
So in some people,
yeah,
what happens is, well, they cut their cholesterol intake, and the body goes, oh God, we're not getting any cholesterol, and it vastly increases its own natural cholesterol production, which causes their cholesterol levels to actually go higher.
Right.
And in some people, when they cut their cholesterol intake, the body's like, oh, okay, and their cholesterol levels dip. Or it's possible that if you increased your cholesterol, the cholesterol you ate, that over time your body would be like, oh, we're getting plenty, and would back off its natural production. And then as you lowered it down, you'd have less cholesterol. So it's really hard to tell what effect either's going to have.
Okay.
And maybe cholesterol is not the best example.
Well, but okay, now we're going off into other things too.
You brought up stimulating your vagus nerve to heal yourself.
Okay,
so this is.
And I am going to come.
You get the economist to come at you now.
We are going to come back to the trigeminal nerve. However, now that we're going off on this tangent,
yeah,
we talk about science a lot. I talk about science a lot.
Yes,
and we talk about it a lot together, and I love science. I do, and I believe more or less in the scientific method. I've taught the scientific method at one of my first college professor jobs I was teaching a class on the scientific method. So, I know the scientific method, but I also know there are flaws in the scientific method. I happen to believe it's the best method we have right now for advancing our knowledge and understanding of stuff, but it's not perfect. And So you have the whole scientific method and whether that's perfect or not. And there's some really interesting issues that you would be interested in as an economist and as a statistician about, regression towards the mean. And we could go off on that tangent. But it's we even if you follow the scientific method, you have to. There's always this problem, especially when we're talking about humans and what affects humans. There's always the problem of how do you generalize that. So I think, cholesterol is, if you went off on that tangent. So that's a great example where, as you said, now we know that the body's manufacturing most of it. And then we also know that some people seem, they create it very easily and other people don't. We also know there's different different kinds of cholesterol.
Right, exactly.
And now we know that actually the relationship between cholesterol and heart disease is not what we thought it was. So
that's why the U.S. government said this year, hey, remember how we said, you shouldn't eat eggs?
Yeah.
Go eat all the eggs you want.
But see but that's not even, it's like go eat all the eggs you want, except the bigger issue is, by the way, lowering your cholesterol for a lot of people, actually, taking drugs, for instance, statin drugs to lower your cholesterol, it will, we get to the point where what we're measuring has no meaning. We do this in science. So we can measure cholesterol, and then you take the drugs to lower your cholesterol. But does that make your life better? But it doesn't change your life, right? I mean, for a really small number of people, it might change their life. But for the 97%, I'm making that number up, but for a lot of people that are on the statin drugs, all it is doing is lowering the cholesterol number without any change in your longevity or your health or your anything.
And while we're talking about SARS, I have actually done a lot of research about different diets.
Yeah.
To deter, and not about how the people felt, because I didn't do that, but strictly who lived longer.
On certain diets.
Yes, and this was after accounting for, you had to find, I did a lot of research to find good studies that, accounted for income, and accounted for location, and accounted for job type, and accounted for race, and accounted for gender, and accounted for age. All these things, and they accounted for the best that they could.
And?
It's a really good study. Studies, there was a couple of them.
Yeah.
And basically, people who eat lots of
worms,
processed and red meat have shorter life expectancies.
And if you eat grasshoppers, you have a longer. People
who have vegetarian and also eat fish have slightly longer life expectancies, and also, so if you're vegetarian, and people who eat fish, it's a little bit longer. And
we're talking like a year. 2 years?
I think like 3 years for people who ate fish, and then it was like two and a half.
Do you think out of a
for vegetarians
87-year lifetime, is it worth it to get those 3 years?
I don't know. I mean, well, the other thing is, because that's just how long you live. There's also, more importantly, how well you feel.
Right.
And some people would feel better, some people will feel worse. It's really hard to tell. And it probably and the thing is, it probably depends on the person, right? Like there are people who eat a McDonald's hamburger every single day and they live till they're 85. There's people who eat a strict, vegan diet and everything's raw and they live till they're 75. It just depends on the person. And for some people, probably depending on what you grew up with, maybe eating a ton of red meat is exactly what your body needs to stay strong and healthy. And for some people, it's exactly the opposite. So, but the point is that it. I just wanted to share that that's when it comes to diet. There is some research out there that does show that there is a small correlation between red meat and life expectancy. But the other thing I wanted to say is, I'm an economist.
Yeah.
And especially, I kind of. Right during the beginning of the Great Recession, right there, should we do the TARP acid, the temporary acid relief program? Should
Wait a minute,
we
which
bail
recession
out the
are we
banks?
talking about?
The Great Recession that just happened.
Is that what it's called now?
Yes, officially, with a capital G and a
So
capital
like
R.
the Great Depression was in the 1920s?
Yes, and the Great Recession was what recently
2008?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yes. In the Great Recession.
People ask me, right? Like, what should we do? Should we cut the budget? Should we increase it? Right?
Yeah.
And the problem is that and that's one of my biggest gripes. That's why people complain about economists. Is that so economists deal with linear algebra, and there's like there's in calculus like the areas under curves. And so, it's not always a strict linear relationship.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's exponential for various things. So it's where two curves intersect. So basically, there's a magic line where if you do too much, it's bad. And if you do too little, right, it's bad. You need like the Goldilocks porridge that's somewhere. And the problem is you don't know where that is.
Yeah.
Right? So, so like for government, in some cases, if you have too much government spending, it's bad. If you have too little government spending, it's bad. But how do we know that we're currently too high or too low, right? So like there's all this like sometimes when you do one thing, so let's say you're trying to increase jobs, right? Well, if you do this one thing, it increases jobs. So a lot of people's expectations is, well, let's just do more of that thing for forever.
Right.
Right. But eventually you get to a point where increasing that thing actually reduces jobs.
Right.
And so there's this weird balance back and forth that you got to do all the time. So, so my answer to like all the questions about economics, for it's frustrating as it is, well, it depends.
Well, and that's the answer, that's the same answer that people who work in the field of usability and human factors give all the time,
Right.
Should we have more items on the menu or less items on the menu? Should the button be red or should it be blue? Well, it depends,
Right, exactly. And I think it's a problem
that
we have in, just in society in general, like I said kind of at the beginning, where people just assume, well, if some is good, then more is better. And that's not always the case because, the world is complicated and these kind of statistically, relationships aren't always just pretty linear.
Well, we could do.
So it's more complicated.
We could do, and we should do, an entire episode, and it's not this one.
Yeah.
On the problem, the myths, misconceptions, misunderstandings of science. Like that's one. Another one is, correlation does not imply causation. Mm-hmm. Another one is the problem of not being able to replicate research and regression to the mean.
Can I give you another one?
Yeah, what?
That people really, really, really want to do what they want to do, and they'll find any justification to do it.
Right.
And here's the example.
Yeah.
In rats, right?
Yeah.
They gave rats a concentrated dose of the
red. There's always they.
No, it's a group of scientists.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Gave rats a concentrated dose that would be the equivalent of like 1,000 cups of wine a day, for whatever the red thing is in wine.
Okay.
And so someone saw this study that when given a concentrated dose in some rats, it increased the rat's life expectancy slightly.
Yeah.
And of course, the headline is, wine is good for you.
Right.
So right. But if you actually followed the study, you'd have to be a rat and drink 1,000 gallons of wine a day.
I know.
But people just want to drink. They want to find any reason that alcohol is healthy. Right. And so they'll be like, oh, I'm going to drink my healthy glass of wine. And now I'm being health conscious, which right, and science doesn't say that at all. But people want to drink, so they're gonna find there will be a scientific study proving that drinking is good for them, so they don't have to feel bad about drinking all the time.
And which is also an example of overgeneralizing, which is another science. So what's interesting is that I love science and I base my career on science, and yet I know that science isn't perfect, and sometimes I'm like afraid to let anybody else know. Like I don't want them to know, because then, it's like
what like it's the best worst option.
It is. It
like
is
democracy.
And I have this argument all the time. with one particular person who is not a scientist, who then thinks because of these problems, we should just throw it out. But it's like, but we have to move forward. It's the best way to move forward right now. It's not. I know it's not perfect, but no one has shown me, like tarot cards are not as good. So
tarot cards really, really bad
at moving advancing.
Yeah.
I mean, and
calculating nuclear
I don't have any
models.
problems with tarot cards. In fact, I have a theory. I have a theory about tarot cards and crystals and all of that psychic stuff, and we'll go into that in another one because I actually think there's some interesting things going on with that. But put that aside. It's not a great medium for moving us forward in terms of knowledge and understanding of the natural world. And
so, and part of it too is that, we like to think that science is all knowing. There's a lot of parts of various, subjects, especially about the brain and about human biology.
About humans. There's so because and
we just
it's hard to study because you can't
kill
do
people.
a controlled experiment where you take one group of people and you make
take
them
parts of
drink
their brains out.
All they drink is the 1,000 glasses of wine, and they don't have any other food or drink, right? I mean, you can't do that research on people, and so it's and not to mention the complicated variables of genetics and environment and what they're eating.
Yeah, and that's something like that's the thing is like it's so complicated. So for example, you can see in your own genes if your grandfather smoked. Right? Smoking causes gene changes that's passed down through multiple generations.
Yeah.
Right? So so from a genetic level, right? You may have this card dealt against you that's based on what your parents' dietary situation was. And that, just to add in a whole fresh new
whole
wrinkle.
nother level.
So now that we're learning that brains are hackable, and by the way, we're gonna do a part 3 of this podcast.
Why?
Well, because we didn't talk about any of the hackable brain stuff.
Well, we talked about a little bit. I tried to get us back there,
and then
times.
we careened off. So we'll have to do a part.
Well, are we gonna
3.
change the name of this one then?
No.
We're gonna call it Hackable Brains Part 2.
Yeah, this will be like the sequel where there's another plot line on the other side of the world that kind of ties in, but not really. But they spend a lot of time on that plot line, but really the main plot isn't moving forward. So that's what this is. But but the point is that as we're starting to learn not somewhat about how the brain works, but we're getting better at interacting with biological processes, right? So putting implants in certain spots that do things, right? We might not know exactly how they're working, but we see their effect, right?
Yeah.
We know that if we do this, then kind of this thing happens. We have a good guess about why it happens, but but we don't know for sure.
I feel we're kind of at to me it's kind of similar to when we started to understand the circulation system,
right?
Before that we didn't realize there was blood.
We had leeches, and
well,
then we
now
knew that
leeches are back.
Yeah, I do know leeches are back.
So don't make fun of leeches. There's
right. So now we know that viruses can change certain DNA and RNA, right? So now we know that if we modify a virus, we can custom implant DNA. And we're not exactly sure on how that works or what the processes are, but we know that if we do this and then we can implant DNA, and now our pigs glow in the dark because they have jellyfish DNA in them, right? So we can see the results even if we can't really make our own animal. We can kind of it's like I don't know how a car works, but I know if I turn the steering wheel or step on the gas, it moves forward. So we're getting to that point with the brain, right? Where we have all this MRI stuff. So we know kind of if we do this thing, then this part of the brain does this thing. And so it helps kind of learn how it works. But more importantly, it helps, we're getting a better I guess, comfortability with hacking it and doing weird stuff to it, again, so you have like virtual reality, right, where you're basically tricking the brain, because the brain will take anything. Brain is very malleable, socially. That's why you can bond with a cat. Or the brain's like, oh, I'm in space now, right? I put on this headset, and I know that I was just in a room, but now I'm in space. And if that rock that's in space is going to hit me, and I better duck, right? It's just the brain will take whatever inputs you give it and turn it into something.
Yeah.
So we're getting to a point where people are going to start mucking around with their brains, doing all kinds of weird stuff.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the trigeminal nerve, though, before we're done.
Yep.
So there's the trigeminal nerve. This is different than the vagus nerve. It's a cranial nerve, meaning it's a nerve in the brain, of which there are several. And when you stimulate this with electricity, so you put on this little headband, this can be done on the outside of the brain, and used to give it that electrical stimulation. And this is another one that helps with depression, anxiety, epilepsy, PTSD. And again, like you just said, exactly why? Don't know. But it seems to work, and it doesn't seem to kill anybody, at least hasn't yet.
That's all you can really ask for.
Yeah,
and people wonder why. I mean, and this is exactly why the FDA hasn't approved this kind of stuff.
No.
Like,
the FDA has approved the trigeminal.
Trigeminal. Oh.
Yeah. The FDA has approved the trigeminal. Hasn't approved and it's approved the vagus nerve implant. It doesn't, for whatever reason, it hasn't approved the external vagus nerve.
I bet you it's hard. It's be like,
in
hey,
Europe, it's approved.
Well,
you can buy one in Europe, and people are using it.
I'm just saying it's probably difficult to be like, hey, we don't really know what's going on, but we know if we like send some electrical impulses on this nerve, we get these results. But we really don't know why or what. And the FDA they got their whole shtick about you have to prove certain things, and right, that's the right that's a tough bar when you're not really right, because the nerve isn't making serotonin. The nerve isn't doing these biological processes.
I don't know why the FDA. I don't want to. I mean, who knows why the FDA hasn't approved it yet? I don't even want to.
But
guess.
Right? But it obviously has impacts on all these systems, and you just don't know how everything reacts to everything. But the body is pretty resilient. It's pretty hard to mess things up and kill you. So.
Oh, I don't know if that's true. I think you could. I think it's pretty easy to mess things up and kill you.
The body's pretty resilient. It can take. Oh, can I tell my electrocution story?
What electrocution story?
So when I was in Texas, I was hanging out with some friends, and one of the people there had a taser, like a rape taser, like because she went to school at a college that was in maybe not the safest neighborhood.
Okay.
And so she had a taser.
You can buy a taser?
In Texas, you can have a firearm. Yeah, well, okay, you can't buy like an industrial grade police taser.
Oh.
But in certain states, you can't even have pepper spray. Certain cities, that's considered a weapon.
So let's just say she had one and it wasn't illegal.
I'll put it this way: if you hold it up and you hit the little button, it goes, and you can see the little electricity, and it's
scary.
very bright.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's scary, but it's not like the industrial grade police tasers where it shoots out and like.
So you can have
sends
a taser, and yet you can't have a vagus nerve stimulator. Like, explain that. All right, let's not get into that. Go ahead. Tell us your electrocution story.
As a side note, I think like paternal government systems are very stupid.
Yeah, we're gonna go off into politics, and then.
But I didn't. So I just.
We're gonna get angry emails from our listeners if we go into politics.
I'll just let that be.
Okay.
But yeah, and so So I don't know. We were all hanging out, and this guy was like, I kind of want to know what it feels like. And so we're like, all right. So he tasered himself in the leg.
Oh my God.
And he was like, oh, whoa, that's pretty crazy. But it wasn't that bad.
Uh-huh.
So then we all like took turns tasing ourselves.
You know.
And so I like braced myself, and then they set the
I
taser
haven't
on my
heard this
leg.
story. Yeah.
And it like singed my skin through my jeans.
This is horrible.
It was really cool.
No, it's really terrible.
Like you could feel like your whole like in the milliseconds, like you could feel like time slow down, and you could feel like each like contraction and vibration of your muscles for like that 1 second.
So wait a minute. You don't think people should zap their vagus nerve for health, and yet recreational self-tasering is okay?
I didn't say they I mean, no, they certainly can. I just don't think that people should be convinced of its health benefits. I tasered myself knowing full well that there's like nothing healthy about what was going on. Like this was just 20-year-olds being stupid. I wasn't doing it then thinking it was going to improve my life, except now I have a cool story. It was kind of neat. I mean, it was through genes, so it wasn't direct. And if you think about it and brace yourself, it's not too bad. But I could certainly, if you didn't see it coming, I could certainly imagine that would be quite the not fun experience. Yeah, so that's my, so yes. So, and then when I was younger, I had a science teacher who would just run a little bit, we'd all hold hands in a circle and just run a little bit of current through the group. And you would pass from person to person. That was kind of fun.
He did not.
Yeah, that's a true story. So, yes, a little bit of electricity. So, the point is that I have been slightly electrocuted before. I'm sure lots of people have stuck their fingers in wall sockets out there.
No, we are not suggesting that people put their finger in a wall socket.
No. When people were young, they were stupid and they did it, and then they almost died.
I think you can die from doing that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm just saying, I'm sure our listeners have accidentally electrocuted themselves in some capacity. So electricity is weird. Electricity does weird things to the body.
It does. It does do
really weird things.
Yeah, I think that as we move forward on the hack your own brain thing, I think we're gonna find all kinds of people doing all kinds of strange.
It's just so weird, right? Especially you think of the static electricity, right? You shuffle your feet on a carpet, you're playing around, and then you go to kiss your spouse when they get home, and bzz, right, and it shocks, and it's painful. It's so weird that a electronic shock would cause pain, because it's not actually right, but it's impacting the nerves in such a strange way. That's just kind of how it works.
Yeah.
So it's all very interesting. I know also in professional sports.
Yeah.
They're starting to do all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah, what are they doing?
This. Well, because you can do muscle stimulation to help, injury progress.
Yeah.
They're doing weird stuff. People are getting stem cells injected into really weird places.
Wow.
So you know Peyton Manning?
No. Should I?
Yeah,
I'm showing my sports ignorance.
Yeah.
Who is that?
Anyways, he was a quarterback, and he got injured in the neck, and then he went to Europe.
Yeah.
And he definitely got stem cells, just injected into his neck. And then and his neck was better, and maybe he was also taking steroids, but that's unconfirmed. And then Kobe Bryant did the same procedure, too, where he basically went to Europe where it's legal and got, weird stem cells injected into places. And they already do hyperbaric chamber testing, where you basically go into a low oxygen or a low pressure environment or high pressure environment. I forget which way it goes. And then you you run on a treadmill, and it mucks with your body because there's too much pressure and not enough pressure, so you can't get the correct amount of blood to certain places, so it lets you train harder. There's all kinds of really strange stuff that they do in professional sports.
I just want to put a little sensor on my ear and give myself a little bit of electrical stimulation to my vagus nerve. That's all I want.
I know, but the stimulation of the vagus nerve is very interesting because when you're talking about, there's a growing body of research that shows that a lot of things are actually connected to inflammation.
Yes.
That the underlying very potential underlying cause of a lot of diseases,
diseases is inflammation.
Are influenced very strongly by inflammation and inflammation response.
Right, and it's an autoimmune response.
Right, but that's not always a bad thing.
Yes.
When I grew up, right, if you rolled your ankle, you went home and you got some ice on it. Yeah. That was like rule number 1 of ankle recovery.
Yeah.
That's not true anymore.
Really?
Yeah, if you go on the kind of, sports websites, especially in professional athletics, if you get an ankle sprain, you're unless it's a certain type of sprain, you're not supposed to ice it. You're actually supposed to keep it warm, keep it loose, and encourage the inflammation, encourage the blood flow, and it'll actually help the ankle heal faster because, that's what inflammation does.
Right. But inflammation can go too far. Now.
Right. Well, that's why they're like, basically what you do is you just try to keep it warm and loose, and you'll recover faster. But if you actually want to play on it, then you got to ice it to keep the inflammation down. So it all depends if you want to heal faster or if you want to actually be able to go about your business.
So I want to bring this up to a meme level. Can I do that? Mm-hmm. So first of all, I feel like we have to say this before I bring it up to a meme level. We're not doctors. We're not psychiatrists or licensed therapists.
No, and I'm an idiot who tasered myself for fun.
So really nothing we are saying in this podcast anyone should take as medical, psychiatric, or psychological advice. Okay, I really want everyone to understand that. But bringing it up a level too, because we've talked about a lot of stuff, and I don't want people to go off and try things because they heard it on our podcast. But bringing it up a level, I think that as we all, I think humans are curious, and I think we're kind of in this age right now where we like the idea of self-hacking and life hacking and brain hacking, and there's a lot of knowledge and information that is available to a lot of people that maybe wasn't available before. That's not always a good thing. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not. And so I think we're entering this age where people kind of want to, they want to experiment. They want to find out for themselves. They, and maybe this isn't true. Maybe this is just, maybe I'm seeing things through my own point of view. But, it's
I think you're right.
They maybe don't trust the quote experts.
Right.
As much, and they'd rather, self-experiment.
They also don't like to hear what the experts have to say.
Well, I think the whole, people want to send in their own DNA and get their own genetic test. I just think we're in this time period where people realize there is information available about themselves, and there's technology available or starting to become available that they can try out and experiment with on themselves. And I think that this is a trend, and it's going to continue, and we're probably just right at the beginning of it. And it may not always be a good thing, but I don't know that we're going to be able to resist. I think people are just, curious in that way.
And throughout human history, humans have basically been doing really weird stuff to try and make them better.
Yeah.
Whether it's leeching themselves or ingesting lead or, getting chemo. We do all kinds of weird stuff to try and make us feel better and different.
Now we have access to more technology to do that.
Now we have, even more stuff to try.
So be careful out there, people.
Yes, be careful out there, people. And,
all right. Well, there you go. I think we've wandered enough for this episode.
And Yeah, I think people are really starting to take stuff into their own hands.
I would love.
That's why medical marijuana is now legal in 25 states.
Do you think if we asked people to write in and tell us what they've experimented with hacking their brains, they would do that?
You can certainly ask.
So if you guys have tried stuff to improve your mental state, to improve your how your brain works, let us know. Send us an email. And where can they email us at, Guthrie?
info@theteamw.com.
And we also want to tell them that if they like our podcast, they should literally like our podcast somewhere.
I'm supposed to say this at the beginning, and I keep forgetting.
I know, so that's why I'm bringing it up now.
You really should just interrupt me in the beginning and just be like,
and
we're doing this thing.
yeah, I might do that. And like our podcast, share it with people, tell people about it. That's how we grow our audience. And thank you so much for listening. So until next time.
We will talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.